The dusty road stretched endlessly ahead as Elena Martinez gripped the steering wheel of her old pickup truck. Her heart pounded with each mile that brought her closer to Thunder Creek Ranch. 3 months ago, she never imagined she would be driving through the middle of nowhere, heading to a place she had never seen before. The city was behind her now. So was the veterinary clinic she had built from nothing. So was David, the man she thought she would marry until she found him stealing money from their shared business account. The betrayal still stung like a fresh wound, but Elena pushed those thoughts away. Today was about starting over. Thunder Creek Ranch appeared around a bend in the road like something from a movie. Rolling green pastures stretched as far as the eye could see. Horses grazed peacefully in the distance, their coats shining in the afternoon sun. A large wooden sign at the entrance read, Thunder Creek Ranch Est, 1952, in faded paint. Elena pulled up to the main house, a beautiful two-story building with a wraparound porch that looked like it had weathered many storms. Before she could even turn off the engine, a man emerged from the barn. He was tall and broad-shouldered, wearing worn jeans and a cowboy hat that shadowed his face. Even from a distance, she could tell he moved with the confidence of someone who belonged to this land. Jake Harrison stopped in his tracks when he saw her. He had been expecting an older man, maybe someone with gray hair and decades of experience. Instead, a young woman with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail stepped out of the truck. She wore simple jeans and boots, but there was something about the way she carried herself that caught his attention. "You must be the vet," Jake said, walking over with measured steps. His voice was deep and careful, like he was used to thinking before he spoke. "Elena Martinez," she replied, extending her hand. Her grip was firm and she looked him straight in the eye. "You called about a stallion?" Jake nodded toward the barn. "Midnight storm, been giving us trouble for weeks now. Won't let anyone near him, barely eating. 3 other vets have tried and failed." They walked toward the large barn. Together, Elena could hear the commotion before she saw it. The sound of hooves hitting wood echoed through the air, followed by frustrated voices of ranch hands trying to calm an obviously agitated horse. "Easy, boy! Easy!" One of the workers called out, but the horse's response was another angry kick. Against the stall door, Elena peered through the wooden slats and saw him. Midnight Storm was magnificent, a pure black stallion with eyes that burned with intelligence and fury. His coat gleamed like polished obsidian, and every muscle in his powerful body was tense with rage. This was not just any horse. This was a creature with spirit, and that spirit had been broken somehow. What happened to him? Elena asked, studying the horse's movements. Jake's jaw tightened. Previous owner didn't treat him right. We bought him from a ranch that was closing down. Been trying to help him trust again, but he trailed off as Midnight Storm let out another angry whinny. Elena watched the stallion for several minutes without saying a word. The ranch hands looked at her skeptically. They had seen other vets come and go, all of them defeated by this beautiful but troubled animal. "I need everyone to step back," Elena said quietly. "Way back." "Ma'am, I don't think that's a good idea," one of the older ranch hands warned. "He's been known to bite." Elena turned to Jake. "Do you trust me?" There was something in her voice that made Jake pause. He looked into her brown eyes and saw determination mixed with compassion. Against his better judgment, he nodded to his men. "Do what she says." Everyone moved away from the stall, leaving Elena alone with the angry horse. She approached slowly, not looking directly at Midnight Storm, but keeping him in her peripheral vision. She began to hum softly, a gentle tune. Her grandmother used to sing when Elena was scared as a child. The stallion's ears twitched. His thrashing slowed slightly. Elena continued humming as she got closer to the stall. She didn't reach out to touch him or make any sudden movements. She simply stood there, sharing the space with him, letting him know she wasn't a threat. Minutes passed like hours. Jake found himself holding his breath, watching this stranger work some kind of magic he didn't understand. His ranch hands stood frozen, equally mesmerized. Finally, Midnight Storm stopped kicking. His breathing was still heavy, but the rage in his eyes had dimmed to something closer to curiosity. Elena slowly reached into her pocket and pulled out an apple. She placed it on the ground near the stall and stepped back. The stallion stared at the apple, then at Elena, then back at the apple. After what felt like forever, he stretched his neck forward and sniffed. Then, carefully, he took the fruit. "Well, I'll be damned," one of the ranch hands whispered. Jake felt something shift inside his chest. He had been around horses his entire life, but he had never seen anything like what just happened. This woman, this stranger who had appeared out of nowhere, had done in minutes what others couldn't do in weeks. Elena turned to face Jake, and for a moment their eyes met and held. She saw something in his gaze that made her heart skip, respect, maybe even admiration. But there was also wariness, like he was a man who had learned not to trust too easily. "He's not mean," Elena said, her voice soft but confident. "He's scared. Someone hurt him badly, and now he thinks everyone will hurt him. It's going to take time to show him that's not true." Jake nodded slowly. "How much time?" "That depends on him. Could be days, could be weeks, but I think he wants to trust again. He just doesn't know how." As Elena spoke about the horse, Jake couldn't help but wonder if she was talking about more than just Midnight Storm. There was something in her voice, an understanding that seemed to come from personal experience with being hurt and learning to trust again. "There's a cabin on the property where you can stay," Jake offered, "if you're willing to stick around and work with him." Elena looked back at Midnight Storm, who was now watching her with curious eyes instead of angry ones. Then she looked at the ranch stretching out around them, at the mountains in the distance painted gold by the setting sun. For the first time in months, she felt something that might have been hope. "I'll stay," she said simply. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Elena unloaded her few belongings from the truck. Jake watched her from the porch, wondering what had brought this mysterious woman to his ranch. He didn't know it yet, but her arrival would change everything. For Midnight Storm, for the ranch, and most of all, for his own carefully guarded heart. The first week at Thunder Creek Ranch tested Elena's patience in ways she hadn't expected. It wasn't just Midnight Storm who seemed wary of her presence. The entire ranch community watched her with curious but doubtful eyes. She was the outsider, the city girl who claimed she could fix what others couldn't. Every morning, Elena arrived at the barn before sunrise. She would sit outside Midnight Storm's stall with a cup of coffee, talking to him in the same gentle voice she had used that first day. The stallion would watch her through the wooden slats, his dark eyes following her every movement. "You don't trust me yet, do you, boy?" she would whisper. "That's okay. I understand what it's like when someone breaks your heart." The ranch hands were polite but distant. During lunch breaks, they would gather in small groups, talking quietly among themselves. Elena caught bits of their conversations, discussions about whether she really knew what she was doing, whether Jake had made a mistake hiring another outsider. Jake himself was a puzzle she couldn't solve. He was always respectful, checking on her progress each day, but he kept his distance. Their conversations were strictly professional. He would ask about Midnight Storm's condition, listen to her updates, and then disappear back to his work managing the ranch. On Thursday morning, everything changed. Elena was in the stall with Midnight Storm, having finally earned enough trust to be in the same space with him. She was gently brushing his coat, humming the same tune that had calmed him on that first day. The stallion stood, perfectly still, enjoying the attention he had been denied for so long. Dark clouds had been gathering since dawn, and now the first rumble of thunder echoed across the valley. Midnight Storm's ears perked up, and Elena felt his muscles tense beneath her hands. "It's okay," she murmured, continuing to brush his neck. "Just a little storm." But as the thunder grew louder, Midnight Storm became more agitated. His breathing quickened, and he began to pace in the small space. Elena realized this was more than just fear of loud noises. This was a deep, traumatic reaction to something from his past. When the first lightning bolt lit up the sky, followed immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the barn, Midnight Storm reared up on his hind legs. Elena pressed herself against the wall as the terrified stallion thrashed wildly, his hooves striking the wooden walls with dangerous force. "Help!" she called out, but her voice was lost in the chaos of the storm and the horse's panic. Jake was in his office when he heard the commotion from the barn. He dropped everything and ran through the pouring rain, his heart pounding with fear. If something happened to Elena, he would never forgive himself for letting her work with such a dangerous animal. He burst into the barn to find Elena trapped in the stall with the panicking stallion. Without thinking, he reached for the latch to open the door, but Elena's voice stopped him. "Don't," she shouted over the noise. "If you open that door, he'll hurt himself trying to run." Jake watched in amazement as Elena positioned herself in the corner where Midnight Storm couldn't reach her, but continued talking to him in a calm, steady voice. Even with a 1,000-pound animal thrashing just feet away from her, she never lost her composure. "I know you're scared," she said to the horse, her voice somehow carrying over the thunder. "I know someone hurt you during storms like this, but you're safe now. I'm not going anywhere." Slowly, incredibly, the stallion began to respond to her voice. His wild movements became less frantic. When the next thunderclap came, he flinched, but didn't rear up again. Elena began to sing, not hum, but actually sing a lullaby her grandmother had taught her in Spanish. Her voice was clear and beautiful, cutting through the storm like a beacon of calm. Midnight Storm's breathing gradually slowed, and he turned to look at her with wide, frightened eyes. By the time the storm passed, the stallion was standing quietly beside Elena, allowing her to stroke his neck. She was soaked with sweat and rainwater that had blown in through the barn doors, but she had never looked more triumphant. Jake stood outside the stall, his hands gripping the wooden rails so tightly his knuckles were white. He had been ready to risk his own safety to save her, but she had saved herself, and the horse, through sheer determination and skill. "How did you know?" he asked when Elena finally emerged from the stall. She leaned against the barn wall, suddenly exhausted. The way he reacted wasn't just fear of thunder. Someone did something terrible to him during a storm. Maybe beat him. Maybe left him tied up outside in bad weather. The panic was too specific, too deep. Jake studied her face, seeing the compassion and understanding in her eyes. "You've seen that kind of trauma before." "In animals, yes, and ... double quote." She paused, then decided to be honest. "In people too. When someone hurts you badly enough, even things that should be normal become frightening." They stood in comfortable silence. For a moment, listening to the rain slow to a gentle patter on the barn roof. Jake realized he was seeing Elena differently now. She wasn't just a skilled veterinarian, she was someone who understood pain and healing on a level that went beyond medical training. "The hands are talking," Jake said quietly. Elena looked up at him. "About how the city girl nearly got herself killed? About how the city girl just did something none of them thought was possible." Jake's voice held a new respect. "Word's already spread to the other stalls. They're saying you've got a gift." Elena smiled, the first real smile Jake had seen from her since she arrived. It transformed her entire face, making her look younger and somehow more vulnerable. "I don't know about a gift," she said. "I just know what it's like to be afraid and need someone to prove that not everyone will hurt you." As they walked back toward the main house together, Jake found himself wondering about the story behind Elena's words. What had happened to her before she came to Thunder Creek Ranch? Who had hurt her so badly that she understood trauma the way she did? He didn't ask these questions out loud, but Elena seemed to sense his curiosity. "My ex-fiancé," she said simply. "He didn't just break my heart. He destroyed my business and my trust in people. Made me feel like I was stupid for believing in him." Jake stopped walking. "I'm sorry. Don't be. It brought me here, didn't it?" Elena looked around at the ranch, at the mountains in the distance, now visible again as the storm clouds cleared. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to exactly where we need to be. That evening, Jake found himself thinking about Elena's words as he sat on his porch. He had been hurt too. His ex-wife had left him for another man, taking half of everything he had worked for and leaving him with a deep distrust of letting anyone too close, but watching. Elena with Midnight Storm today had shown him something. He had forgotten that healing was possible, even after the worst kind of betrayal. Maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop protecting his heart so carefully and see what might grow if he let down his guard. In her small cabin across the yard, Elena was having similar thoughts. For the first time since David's betrayal, she felt like she might belong somewhere. The ranch was starting to feel less like a place to hide and more like a place to heal. 2 weeks after the storm incident, Elena had become a different person at Thunder Creek Ranch. The ranch hands no longer whispered behind her back. Instead, they sought her advice about their own animals. Word had spread to neighboring ranches about the horse whisperer who had tamed the untamable. Midnight Storm. Elena's days had expanded beyond just working with the Stallion. She found herself helping with sick cattle, treating injured horses, and even assisting with the everyday tasks that kept the ranch running. Her hands, once soft from city living, now bore calluses from handling ropes and hay bales. Jake watched this transformation with growing admiration. Every morning, he found reasons to check on her work, though he told himself it was purely professional interest. But deep down, he knew he was drawn to her in ways that had nothing to do with business. "You don't have to help with the morning feeding," Jake said one Thursday as he found Elena filling water troughs before dawn. "That's not what we're paying you for." Elena looked up from her work, her hair escaping from its ponytail and her cheeks flushed from the physical labor. "I like it," she said simply. "Makes me feel useful." "You are useful. What you've done with Midnight Storm is nothing short of miraculous." It was true. The Stallion now allowed Elena to saddle him, though he still wouldn't let anyone else get too close. But his transformation was remarkable, from a violent, terrified animal to one who whinnied with pleasure when he saw Elena approaching. "He's not the only one who's changed," Elena said, studying Jake's face. "You seem different too, less guarded." Jake felt heat rise in his cheeks. Had he been that obvious? Ranch life has a way of changing people. "No," Elena said, stepping closer. "I think you're letting yourself trust again. Just like Midnight Storm." Their eyes met and held for a moment longer than necessary. Jake felt something stir in his chest, a warmth he hadn't experienced in 3 years. But old habits died hard, and he took a step back. "I should get to the office," he said awkwardly. "Paperwork won't do itself." Elena watched him walk away, recognizing the retreat for what it was. She had seen the same pattern in herself for months after David's betrayal, the automatic pulling back. Whenever someone got too close, that afternoon, Elena was working with Midnight Storm in the paddock. When she noticed Jake watching from the fence, he had been doing this more often lately, finding excuses to observe her training sessions. "Want to try?" she called out to him. Jake shook his head. "He doesn't trust anyone but you." "He might surprise you." Elena led the Stallion over to the fence where Jake stood. "Hold out your hand, palm up." Jake hesitated, then did as she asked. Midnight Storm sniffed his hand cautiously, then surprised everyone by gently nuzzling Jake's palm with his nose. "Well, I'll be," Jake murmured, a smile breaking across his face. "He's learning that not all men will hurt him," Elena said softly. "Sometimes that's the hardest lesson to learn." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a truck carrying feed supplies. As they worked together to unload the heavy bags, their teamwork was seamless. Jake would lift, Elena would stack, and they developed a rhythm that spoke of growing comfort with each other. "You know," Jake said during a break, wiping sweat from his forehead, "I wasn't sure about hiring another outsider. The last vet we brought in from the city lasted exactly 3 days before deciding ranch life wasn't for her. What made her leave?" Sighed. "It was too isolated, too much work, not enough modern conveniences." Jake paused. "I was afraid you might feel the same way." Elena looked around at the vast landscape, the mountains painted purple in the afternoon light, the horses grazing peacefully in the distance. "I can't imagine wanting to be anywhere else." Something in her voice made Jake turn to study her face. "You mean that?" "I spent years building a practice in the city, thinking that was success, but I was miserable. I was so focused on making money and impressing people that I forgot why I became a vet in the first place, Elena's voice grew thoughtful. Here. Every day matters. Every animal I help makes a real difference. Even when it means getting up before dawn and working until dark? Especially then, Elena smiled. I sleep better here than I have in years. No traffic, no constant phone calls, no pressure to be someone I'm not. That evening, Jake surprised Elena by inviting her to join him for dinner at the main house instead of eating alone in her cabin. They sat on the front porch afterward, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Tell me about your ex-wife, Elena said quietly. Jake's jaw tightened. What makes you think there was one? The way you talk about trust, the way you keep your distance. I recognize the signs because I have them too. Jake was quiet for so long that Elena thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to speak. Rebecca, we were married for 5 years. I thought we had a good life here, building something together. Then I found out she had been seeing someone else for months, a businessman from Denver who could offer her the city life she really wanted. I'm sorry, the worst part wasn't even the cheating. It was realizing that she had never really loved this place, never loved the life we were building. She saw it all as temporary, something to endure until something better came along. Elena understood. David wasn't cheating with another woman. He was cheating with my money, embezzling from our shared accounts to fund some get-rich-quick scheme. When it failed, he blamed me for not being supportive enough of his vision. How? Did you find out? The bank called about overdraft fees. Turns out our business account was empty, and he had taken out loans in my name. Elena's voice remained steady, but Jake could hear the old pain underneath. Lost the clinic, my savings, my reputation. Everyone in town thought I was either incredibly stupid or in on it. They sat in comfortable silence as stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Jake realized this was the first time in 3 years he had talked about Rebecca without feeling bitter. And Elena had shared her story without the shame that usually accompanied thoughts of David's betrayal. I used to think I was a good judge of character, Jake said. You are. You just learn to be careful, that's all. There's nothing wrong with protecting yourself. Is that what you're doing here? Protecting yourself? Elena considered the question. At first, yes. But now, I think I'm healing. And I think Midnight Storm isn't the only one learning to trust again. Jake turned to look at her, seeing something in her expression that made his heart race. For a moment, he thought about reaching for her hand, about closing the distance between them on the porch swing. Instead, he stood up abruptly. It's getting late. You should get some rest. Elena recognized the retreat but didn't call him on. Good night, Jake. Good night, Elena. As she walked across the yard to her cabin, Jake remained on the porch, watching her go. For the first time since Rebecca left, he was beginning to imagine what it might be like to share his life with someone again. The thought both thrilled and terrified him. In her cabin, Elena lay awake thinking about the evening's conversation. She had told Jake things she hadn't shared with anyone else, and somehow that felt right. Safe, even. Maybe it was time to stop. Running from the possibility of caring about someone again. Outside her window, she could see Midnight Storm grazing peacefully in the moonlight. No longer the terrified, angry animal she had first encountered. They were all healing here at Thunder Creek Ranch, the horse, Jake, and herself. The question was whether they would heal together or continue to keep their safe distances from each other. The emergency call came at 3 a.m. Jake's phone rang with the desperate voice of Tom Bradley from the neighboring Sunrise Valley Ranch. His cattle were sick, dozens of them, showing symptoms that could mean disaster for every ranch. In the valley, Jake, I need help. The animals are dropping like flies, and I don't know what's wrong. Can your vet come out here, please? Jake was already pulling on his clothes as he spoke. We'll be there in 20 minutes. He knocked on Elena's cabin door, finding her already dressed and gathering her medical supplies. She had heard his truck start and knew something was wrong. How bad is it? She asked as they drove through the dark country roads toward Sunrise Valley. Tom didn't say much, but he sounded scared. And Tom Bradley doesn't scare easily. They arrived to find chaos. In the beam of Jake's headlights, they could see cattle lying motionless in the field, while others staggered around looking disoriented. Tom Bradley met them at the gate, his face pale and drawn. "Started about 6 hours ago," he explained as they walked toward the affected animals. "First, it was just a few acting sluggish. Now we've got 23 down and more getting sick by the hour." Elena knelt beside the nearest cow, checking its breathing and pulse. The symptoms were alarming: rapid breathing, elevated temperature, and a strange odor on the animal's breath. "Jake, shine the light here," she said, examining the cow's eyes and gums. "Tom, what did they eat today? Anything different?" "Same. Feed as always, but ... Tom hesitated. "We did get a new shipment of grain yesterday. First time using that supplier." Elena and Jake exchanged worried looks. "I need to see that grain," Elena said urgently. In the feed barn. Elena took samples of the new grain while Jake examined the storage area. The grain looked normal, but Elena's trained nose detected something that made her stomach turn. "This grain is contaminated," she announced. "I can smell the mold even from here. We're looking at mycotoxin poisoning." "How bad?" Jake asked, though he could tell from Elena's expression that it was serious. "If we don't act fast, we could lose all of them." "And if this contaminated grain came from a large supplier?" Elena didn't need to finish the sentence. "Every ranch that used the same supplier could be facing the same crisis." For the next 18 hours, Elena and Jake worked without stopping. They administered activated charcoal to help absorb the toxins, provided supportive care for the sickest animals, and coordinated with other ranches that might have received the same contaminated grain. Elena's expertise shone through the crisis. She calculated dosages, monitored vital signs, and made life-or-death decisions with the calm confidence of someone born for this work. Jake found himself watching her with growing admiration and something deeper, something that felt like pride, in seeing her excel at what she loved. By evening, they had saved 21 of the 23 animals that had been affected. Tom Bradley was so grateful he nearly cried when Elena gave him the final count. "You saved my ranch," he told her, his voice thick with emotion. "If I had lost this herd, I would have lost everything." As they drove back to Thunder Creek Ranch, both Elena and Jake were exhausted but exhilarated. They had worked as a perfect team, anticipating each other's needs and moving in sync through the crisis. "I couldn't have done that without you," Elena said as Jake pulled into the ranch driveway. "You're the one who diagnosed the poisoning. You saved those animals, but you helped me every step of the way. You knew exactly what I needed before I even asked." "That's not something you can teach. That's partnership." The word hung in the air between them. Partnership. It implied something more than just professional cooperation. And they both felt it. They sat in the truck for a moment, neither wanting to break the spell of the day's shared triumph. In the darkness, Elena's hand brushed against Jake's on the gear shift. Instead of pulling away, he turned his palm up and gently intertwined their fingers. "Elena," he said softly, his voice rough with exhaustion and something else, "I need to tell you something." She waited, her heart racing at the touch of his hand and the intensity in his voice. "When I hired you, I thought I was just getting a vet to fix my horse. I didn't expect—" He struggled for the words. "I didn't expect you to fix me too," Elena's breath caught. "Jake, ... I know we're both scared. I know we've both been hurt. But today, working with you, seeing how perfectly we fit together, I can't pretend anymore that this is just professional." Elena squeezed his hand. "I stopped pretending weeks ago." Jake turned to face her fully, his free hand reaching up to cup her cheek. "I'm falling for you, Elena, hard, and it terrifies me." "Good," she whispered, leaning into his touch. "Because I'm terrified too, and I'm falling just as hard." Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, two people who had been hurt learning to trust again. But when they pulled apart, both knew that something fundamental had shifted between them. "What happens now?" Elena asked. "I don't know," Jake admitted. "But I know I don't want to find out alone." They walked to Elena's cabin together, their hands still intertwined. At her door, Jake hesitated. "I should let you get some rest," he said, though everything in his body language suggested he didn't want to leave. "Stay," Elena said simply. "Just to talk. I'm too wound up from today to sleep anyway." They sat on Elena's small porch, sharing a bottle of water and talking about everything and nothing. Elena told Jake about her childhood on her grandmother's farm, how she had always known she wanted to work with animals. Jake shared stories about building Thunder Creek Ranch from almost nothing, the pride he took in creating something lasting. "I used to think success meant having everything under control," Elena said as the first light of dawn began to creep over the mountains. "Perfect clinic, perfect relationship, perfect life all planned out. And now? Now I think success might be learning to trust the unknown. Learning to build something real with someone else, even when you can't control the outcome." Jake looked at her in the growing light, seeing the woman who had not only healed his horse but was slowly healing his heart. "I want to build something real with you, Elena. If you'll let me, I want that too," she replied. "Even though it scares me more than facing down a room full of angry cattle." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the quiet ranch as the sun painted the sky in soft pastels. In the distance, they could see Midnight Storm grazing peacefully, his coat gleaming in the morning light. "Look at him," Elena said fondly. "Remember how angry and scared he was when I first got here?" "Not unlike his owner," Jake said with a rueful smile. "He learned to trust again. We all did." Jake stood and pulled Elena to her feet, wrapping his arms around her in a hug that felt like coming home. "I have a good feeling about us," he murmured against her hair. "Yeah?" Elena smiled against his chest. "What makes you so sure?" "Because we've already survived the hard part, learning to trust again. Everything else is just details." As they stood together watching the sunrise over Thunder Creek Ranch, both felt the truth of those words. They had found something rare and precious, not just love, but the kind of partnership that made them both stronger. And for the first time in years, the future looked full of possibility instead of fear. 3 weeks into their newfound closeness, Elena and Jake had settled into a rhythm that felt as natural as breathing. Elena had moved her morning coffee routine to Jake's front porch, and they would plan their days together as the sun rose over the mountains. Their evening walks had become a cherished tradition, often ending with stolen kisses under the vast Montana sky. Midnight Storm seemed to sense the change in their relationship. The Stallion had grown even more peaceful, allowing Jake to brush him and even accepting treats from the ranch hands. Elena often joked that love was contagious, even among the animals. Everything felt perfect, which is exactly when life decided to test them. Elena was in the barn checking on Amare with a minor injury when she heard an unfamiliar car pull into the ranch driveway. Through the barn doors, she watched a sleek silver sedan park near the main house. Definitely not the kind of vehicle that belonged on a working ranch. Her blood ran cold when she saw who stepped out. David Chun looked exactly the same as he had 6 months ago when she had discovered his betrayal. Expensive suit, perfectly styled hair, and that confident smile that had once charmed her but now made her feel sick. He stood looking around the ranch with obvious disdain, his city shoes already collecting dust from the gravel driveway. Elena's hands shook as she set down her medical bag. What was he doing here? How had he even found her? "Elena!" David's voice carried across the yard. "There you are. We need to talk." She forced herself to walk out of the barn, her chin raised despite the turmoil in her chest. "What are you doing here, David? Is that any way to greet your business partner?" David's smile was as smooth as ever. "You look rustic. Country life seems to agree with you." "Former business partner," Elena corrected coldly. "And former everything else. You need to leave. Not until we talk. I have a proposition that will change everything." Before Elena could respond, Jake appeared from around the corner of the house. He took in the scene quickly, Elena's tense posture, the stranger in the expensive suit, and the obvious distress on Elena's face. "Everything okay here?" Jake asked, moving to stand beside Elena. His presence was reassuring, but Elena could feel the protective energy radiating from him. "It must be the rancher," David said, extending his hand. David Chun, Elena's business partner. Jake didn't take the offered hand. "Former business partner, from what I understand." David's smile faltered slightly. Well, that's actually what I'm here to discuss. He turned back to Elena. I have incredible news. The Harrison Group in Los Angeles wants to offer us a partnership. They're willing to invest $2 million in a chain of luxury veterinary clinics across California. State-of-the-art facilities, cutting-edge technology, unlimited resources. Elena felt the ground shift beneath her feet. Us, there is no us, David. You stole from me, remember? That was a misunderstanding. A temporary cash flow issue that I've completely resolved. Look, I know I made mistakes, but this opportunity is too big to let personal feelings get in the way. David pulled out a folder from his car. I've already told them about your incredible skills. They specifically want you to head up the program. She's not interested, Jake said firmly. David's eyes flicked to Jake with barely concealed irritation. I think Elena can speak for herself, he focused back on her. This is everything we dreamed about when we started our practice. Unlimited funding, the best equipment money can buy, clients who can afford premium care. You'd never have to worry about money again, Elena's mind raced. $2 million. Luxury clinics. Everything she had once thought she wanted. But as she looked around the ranch, at the mountains, at the horses grazing peacefully, at Jake's concerned face, those dreams felt like they belonged to someone else. I need time to think, she heard herself say. Jake's face went pale. Elena, ... It's a lot to process, she said quickly, not meeting his eyes. David, you need to leave now? If I decide to hear more, I'll contact you. David smiled triumphantly. I'm staying at the hotel in town. Don't take too long. They want an answer by the end of the week. He handed her the folder and got back in his car, but not before giving Jake a look that clearly said he expected to win. After David drove away, Elena and Jake stood in awkward silence. The folder felt heavy in Elena's hands, weighted with possibilities. And the ghost of her old life. You're actually considering this, Jake said quietly. I don't know what I'm considering. He just showed up and threw this at me. It's everything you used to want. Elena looked at him sharply. Used to want. Past tense. But maybe it's what you still want. Maybe what we have here isn't enough. Don't put words in my mouth, Jake. I'm not. I'm just being realistic. This ranch, this life, it's simple. Maybe too simple for someone with your talents. Elena felt anger flare in her chest. So you're just going to assume I'll leave? Just like that? Wouldn't be the first time, Jake said, his own defenses rising. Rebecca said she loved the ranch too until something better came along. I'm not Rebecca, aren't you? Someone shows up offering you everything you used to dream about, and suddenly you need time to think about it. Elena stared at him, hurt and frustrated. I said I needed time because I was shocked, not because I was tempted. But apparently you've already decided I'm going to betray you. I haven't decided anything. I'm just protecting myself by assuming the worst of me. They stood facing each other across a gulf that had opened in minutes. Elena felt tears stinging her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. You know what? Maybe you're right. Maybe I should consider David's offer. At least he believes in me enough to think I might succeed. Jake's face hardened. Then maybe you should. Elena turned and walked toward her cabin, the folder clutched in her hands. Behind her, she heard Jake's truck start up and drive away. Probably to lose himself in ranch work the way he always did when emotions got too complicated. Inside her cabin, Elena sat on her bed and stared at the folder without opening it. Through her window she could see Midnight Storm in his paddock, standing at the fence looking toward the main house as if he sensed the tension in the air. That evening, Jake didn't come to the barn for evening feeding. Elena did the work alone, her heart breaking a little more with each task. Midnight Storm kept nuzzling her shoulder as if trying to comfort her. He's scared, boy, she whispered to the stallion. He's been hurt before, and he thinks I'm going to hurt him too. But even as she said it, Elena couldn't shake her own doubts. Was Jake right? Was she kidding herself thinking that ranch life was enough for her? David's offer represented security, prestige, and the chance to work with unlimited resources. Could she really give that up for a man who didn't trust her enough to believe she would choose him? 2 days passed with Jake and Elena maintaining a polite but distant relationship. They discussed ranch business when necessary, but the easy intimacy they had built was gone, replaced by a careful courtesy that hurt more than anger would have. On the third day, Rebecca Harrison, Jake's ex-wife, arrived. Elena was treating a horse with a cut leg when she saw the red convertible pull up to the main house. The woman who got out was everything Elena had imagined: perfectly blonde, expensively dressed, and moving with the confidence of someone who had never doubted her place in the world. Through the barn window, Elena watched Rebecca embrace Jake on the front porch. They talked for several minutes, Rebecca's hands gesturing animatedly while Jake listened with an expression Elena couldn't read from a distance. That evening, Elena saw them having dinner together at the kitchen table, visible through the window. Like a scene from the life Jake used to live. Elena spent the night staring at David's folder, finally opening it to read about the incredible opportunity that awaited her in Los Angeles. State-of-the-art facilities, unlimited budgets, the chance to make a real difference in veterinary medicine. It all sounded wonderful. It all sounded empty, because somewhere between arriving at Thunder Creek Ranch and falling in love with both the land and the man who worked it, Elena had discovered that she didn't want a perfect life. She wanted a real one. She wanted the satisfaction of saving Tom Bradley's cattle, the joy of seeing Midnight Storm learn to trust again, the peace of watching sunrises over the mountains with Jake beside her. But Jake's reaction to David's offer had shown her something painful. He didn't really believe she would choose this life over her old dreams. And if he didn't trust her enough to believe in her choice, maybe they didn't have the partnership she thought they did. As Elena finally fell asleep near dawn, she could hear Rebecca's laughter carrying across the yard from the main house. It sounded like the ghost of Jake's past had returned just as her own past had caught up with her. In the morning, she would have to decide: fight for what she had found at Thunder Creek Ranch, or accept that some things were too broken to be fixed, even by love. The storm hit Thunder Creek Ranch with a fury that seemed to mirror the emotional turmoil of the past week. Elena woke to the sound of wind howling around her cabin and rain hammering against the windows. But it was the frantic lowing of cattle in distress that got her out of bed and into her rain gear. In the main paddock, she could see several head of cattle huddled against the fence, clearly agitated by something beyond just the storm. As lightning illuminated the scene, Elena realized with horror that part of the hillside had given way in a mudslide, trapping 3 cows in a depression that was rapidly filling with water. She ran toward the main house, fighting against the wind. Jake, we have an emergency." Jake appeared on the porch, already dressed for the storm. Rebecca stood behind him in the doorway, looking concerned but staying safely inside. "What is it?" Jake shouted over the wind. "Mudslide. 3 cows trapped in the lower paddock." Without hesitation, Jake grabbed his heavy-duty rope and headed for his truck. "Call Tom Bradley and the Peterson Ranch. We'll need extra hands." Elena ran for her own truck, her heart pounding with adrenaline and fear. The trapped animals wouldn't survive long in the rising water, and the unstable hillside made any rescue attempt dangerous. They reached the paddock to find the situation even worse than Elena had first thought. The 3 cows were trapped in what had become a muddy pond, the water rising steadily around them. One of the animals was clearly injured, struggling to keep her head above water. "We need to get ropes around them and pull them out with the truck," Jake called out, studying the situation. "But someone has to go down there to secure the ropes." "I'll do it," Elena said immediately. "No way, it's too dangerous. If that hillside shifts again, Jake, I'm smaller and lighter. I'll make less disturbance in the mud. And I know how to calm the animals so they don't fight the ropes." Jake looked at the trapped cows, then at the unstable hillside, calculating risks and options. Elena was right, she was the logical choice. But the thought of her going into that dangerous situation made his stomach clench with fear. "Be careful," he said finally, handing her the rope. "If anything shifts, you get out of there immediately?" Elena nodded and made her way carefully down the slippery slope. The mud was deeper than it looked, pulling at her boots with every step. The first cow was easy to reach, and Elena managed to get the rope around her without too much struggle. "Pull!" she shouted to Jake, who had the other end of the rope secured to his truck. The first rescue went smoothly. The cow was pulled to safety, shaken but unharmed. The second cow was more panicked. Thrashing in the water and making the muddy pond even more unstable, Elena approached slowly, speaking in the same calm voice she had used with Midnight Storm during his worst moments. "Easy, girl. We're going to get you out of here." As she reached for the cow to secure the rope, the injured animal made a sudden movement, striking out with her hoof. Elena dodged, but the movement sent her slipping deeper into the mud and water. "Elena!" Jake's voice carried panic. "I'm okay," she called back, though she was now waist-deep in the muddy water and struggling to keep her footing. "Almost got the rope on her." Above them, the storm continued its assault. Another flash of lightning illuminated the scene, followed immediately by a crash of thunder that sent all the animals into renewed panic. Elena finally managed to get the rope around the second cow, but as Jake began to pull, she felt the ground beneath her feet shift ominously. The hillside was becoming more unstable with each passing minute. "Get out of there now!" Jake shouted. "One more, I can get the last one." Elena called back, already working her way toward the third trapped cow. The one who was clearly injured and barely keeping her head above water. Jake made a decision that would haunt him. Instead of ordering Elena out of the danger zone, he moved closer to help speed up the rescue. He was securing a second rope to his truck when the hillside above them let out a deep, ominous rumble. "Elena, move!" he screamed, but it was too late. A section of the hillside gave way, sending a wall of mud and rocks tumbling down toward the paddock. Elena had just secured the rope around the last cow when she heard the roar of the mudslide above her. Jake didn't think. He ran down the slope toward Elena, reaching her just as the first wave of debris struck. He threw himself over her, shielding her with his body as rocks and mud crashed around them. The impact sent them both tumbling into the deeper water. Elena felt Jake's weight on top of her, felt him jerk violently as something struck his back, heard his sharp intake of breath that spoke of serious pain. When the rumbling stopped, Elena found herself pinned under Jake's unconscious body in 3 feet of muddy water. Blood was seeping from a gash on his head, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Jake, wake up!" She managed to get his head above water, supporting his weight as best she could while fighting to keep them both from sinking deeper into the mud. The sound of truck engines approaching was the most beautiful thing Elena had ever heard. Tom Bradley and his crew had arrived, along with the volunteer fire department from town. "Over here!" Elena screamed. "He's hurt badly." The rescue took 20 minutes that felt like hours. Elena never let go of Jake, even when the rescue crew tried to take over. She held his head above water and kept talking to him, begging him to stay with her. "You don't get to leave me now," she whispered fiercely. "Not like this. We have too much to figure out." When they finally got Jake to the hospital, Elena was covered in mud and blood, shaking from cold and shock. Rebecca was waiting in the emergency room, having driven separately. "How is he?" Rebecca asked, her face pale with worry. "They don't know yet," Elena said, sinking into a hard plastic chair. "Head injury, possible spinal damage. They're running tests." "What happened out there?" Elena explained the rescue attempt, her voice mechanical as she relived those terrible moments. "He saved my life. That debris would have killed me if he hadn't." She couldn't finish the sentence. Rebecca studied Elena's face, the fear, the guilt, the obvious love for Jake that she was trying to hide. "You really care about him." "Yes," Elena said simply. "I do." "More than your career in Los Angeles?" Elena looked up sharply. "You know about that?" "Jake told me. He's been eaten up with worry that you'll leave, just like I did." Rebecca's voice was soft with regret. "I came here to try to win him back, but I can see now that he's moved on. He never looked at me the way he looks at you. He doesn't trust me to stay, because he's terrified of being hurt again. But Elena... Rebecca leaned forward. "What I saw in that paddock wasn't a man who doesn't trust you. It was a man who would die before he let anything happen to you." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. Jake had risked everything to save her, had literally put his life on the line without hesitation. Whatever doubts he might have about her feelings, his actions had spoken louder than any words. The doctor emerged from the treatment area, his expression serious. "Are you family?" "I'm his ... Elena hesitated, not sure how to define what she was to Jake. "She's his partner," Rebecca said firmly. "What's his condition?" "Concussion and 3 broken ribs. He's lucky a few inches higher and that rock would have struck his spine. He's going to be in considerable pain for several weeks, and he'll need help with basic activities. Can I see him?" "He's asking for Elena," the doctor said, consulting his chart. "Are you Elena?" "Yes," she whispered. Jake was awake but groggy when Elena entered his room. His head was bandaged, and she could see the effort it took for him to focus on her face. "You're alive," he said, his voice hoarse. "Thanks. To you." Elena took his hand carefully, mindful of his injuries. "You scared me, Jake. I thought I lost you." "Had to make sure you were safe?" Jake squeezed her hand weakly. "Couldn't let anything happen to you, even though you think I'm going to leave?" Jake closed his eyes, and Elena thought he might have fallen asleep, but then he spoke, his voice barely audible. "I don't think you're going to leave. I'm terrified you're going to leave. There's a difference." Elena felt tears finally spill over. "I'm not going anywhere, Jake. I turned down David's offer yesterday. I was coming to tell you when the storm hit." Jake's eyes opened, focusing on her face with difficulty. "You did? I'd belong here, with you, with the ranch, with our life together. I know that now, but the opportunity was someone else's dream." "Not mine. My dream is right here." Elena leaned closer, being careful not to jar his injuries. "I love you, Jake, and I'm not going anywhere." Jake managed a weak smile. "Good, because I love you too, and I'm sorry I doubted you." "You didn't doubt me. You protected your heart. I understand the difference now." As Jake drifted off to sleep, Elena settled into the chair beside his bed. Through the window, she could see the storm beginning to clear, revealing stars through the breaking clouds. Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "I'm heading back to Denver," she said quietly. "Take care of him." "I will," Elena promised. "And Elena, he's lucky to have found you." As Rebecca's footsteps faded down the hospital corridor, Elena took Jake's hand again and made a silent promise. They had both been broken when they found each other, both afraid to trust again. But love had a way of healing even the deepest wounds, if you were brave enough to let it. Jake's recovery was harder than anyone expected. The broken ribs made every breath painful, and the concussion left him with headaches that lasted for days. But the worst part for Jake wasn't the physical pain, it was the feeling of helplessness. As he watched Elena take on more and more responsibility for the ranch. "You don't have to do everything," he said from his spot on the couch where he was supposed to be resting. Elena had just returned from checking on the cattle, her clothes muddy and her face tired. "Someone has to," Elena replied, trying to keep the exhaustion out of her voice. "The animals don't stop needing care just because you're injured." "That's, what the ranch hands are for." The ranch hands are good at following orders, but they need someone to give them. And right now, that someone is me?" Jake watched her move around the kitchen, preparing dinner with efficient movements that spoke of how much she had taken on. She was managing his medical care, running the ranch operations, and still handling her veterinary duties. It was too much for one person, and Jake could see the strain wearing on her. "I should be out there," he muttered, frustrated by his limitations. "You should be healing," Elena said firmly. "The doctor said 6 weeks minimum before you can do any heavy work. 6 weeks of watching you run yourself into the ground because of me." Elena stopped what she was doing and turned to face him. "This isn't because of you, Jake. This is what partners do. They take care of each other when one of them is hurt." "Partners," Jake repeated the word slowly. "Is that what we are?" Elena sat down beside him on the couch, careful not to jostle his injured ribs. "I thought so. But sometimes I wonder if you see it that way." "What do you mean?" "You keep talking. Like you're a burden, like I'm sacrificing something by being here. But Jake, this is my choice. This is where I want to be." Jake looked into her eyes, seeing the sincerity there, but also the hurt he had caused with his doubts. I'm not used to someone staying when things get difficult. I know, but I'm not Rebecca, and I'm not going anywhere just because life gets complicated. Their conversation was interrupted by the sound of Elena's phone ringing. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned. Unknown number, she said, but answered anyway. Hello? Jake watched Elena's face change as she listened to whoever was on the other end. Her expression shifted from confusion to concern to outright alarm. What do you mean he's missing? Elena stood up abruptly. How long has he been gone? Jake struggled to sit up straighter, wincing at the pain in his ribs. What's wrong? Elena held up a hand, still listening intently to the phone call. Yes, I'll be right there. Don't let anyone else go into the paddock until I arrive. She hung up and grabbed her keys. That was Tom Bradley. Midnight storm broke out of his paddock sometime during the night. They found the fence damaged, but no sign of where he went. Horses don't just disappear, Jake said, trying to stand up. There has to be tracks, some indication of direction. There are tracks, Elena said grimly, leading toward the old mining area up in the hills. The dangerous part where the ground is unstable. Jake felt his blood run cold. The old mining area was a maze of abandoned shafts and unstable terrain. If Midnight Storm had wandered up there, especially in his current agitated state, he could easily fall into one of the hidden shafts or trigger a landslide. I'm coming with you, Jake said, reaching for his coat. Absolutely not. You can barely walk without help, let alone hike through dangerous terrain. Elena, that horse means everything to this ranch. He's worth more than all our other livestock combined. And more than that, Jake struggled to find the words. He's like us, he learned to trust again. I can't just sit here while he's in danger. Elena could see the desperation in Jake's eyes. Midnight Storm wasn't just a valuable animal to him. The stallion represented hope, healing, and the possibility of second chances, just like their relationship did. You'll slow us down, Elena said, but her resolve was weakening. I'll keep up. Please, Elena, I need to help find him. Against her better judgment, Elena agreed to let Jake come along, but only if he promised to stay back and let the search team handle the dangerous areas. They drove to Tom Bradley's ranch, where a small group of volunteers had already assembled. The tracks were easy to follow at first. Midnight Storm's hoofprints led clearly up the hill toward the abandoned mining area. But as they climbed higher, the rocky terrain made tracking more difficult. There, called out one of the searchers, pointing to disturbed ground near a cluster of old mining equipment. Looks like he went that way. The trail led toward a particularly treacherous area where old mine shafts dotted the landscape like hidden traps. Some were covered with rotting wooden boards, others were completely open. It was a nightmare scenario for a panicked horse. We need to split up, Elena decided. Cover more ground that way. But nobody goes near the shaft openings alone, work in pairs. Jake paired himself with Tom Bradley, despite Elena's worried looks. She wanted to stay close to Jake, but she knew they would find Midnight Storm faster if they spread out. Elena teamed up with one of Tom's ranch hands and headed toward the eastern section of the mining area. They had been searching for about an hour when they heard it, a distant, desperate whinnying that seemed to echo from somewhere underground. Did you hear that? Elena asked, freezing in place. They listened intently, and the sound came again. Definitely a horse, and definitely in distress. Over there, the ranch hand pointed toward a depression in the ground that was partially hidden by overgrown brush. Sounds like it's coming from that direction. They approached carefully, and Elena's heart sank when she saw what they had found. There was a partially collapsed mine shaft, maybe 12 feet deep, with rotting wooden supports that had given way. At the bottom, Midnight Storm stood in about 2 feet of water, his eyes wild with panic and his coat lathered with sweat. Jake! Elena called out, "Over here! We found him!" Within minutes, the entire search team had gathered around the collapsed shaft. Midnight Storm looked up at them with desperate eyes, whinnying pitifully. He had somehow managed to fall into the shaft without breaking any bones, But he was clearly terrified, and the water was slowly rising from an underground spring. How do we get him out? Tom asked, studying the situation. We'll need ropes and pulleys, Elena said, her mind racing through the logistics. And someone needs to go down there to calm him and get the ropes secured properly. I'll go, Jake said immediately. No, Elena said firmly. You're injured. If you fall down there. With broken ribs, ... Elena, look at him. He's panicking. He won't let strangers near him, and you know it. You're the only one he trusts completely, but you're also the only one with the veterinary knowledge to tell if he's injured. We need you up here directing the rescue. Elena looked down at Midnight Storm, who was becoming more agitated by the minute. Jake was right. The stallion needed someone he trusted to go down and calm him. But the thought of Jake attempting that climb with his injuries made her feel sick. There has to be another way, she said. There isn't, and we both know it. Jake moved closer to the edge of the shaft, and Midnight Storm's ears perked up at the sound of his voice. Hey there, boy. We're going to get you out of there. The stallion whinnied in response, clearly recognizing Jake's voice even in his panicked state. He trusts me too, Jake said quietly to Elena. Not as much as he trusts you, but enough. And right now, I'm the only option we have. Elena closed her eyes, knowing Jake was right but hating every part of it. If you get hurt worse than you already are, I will never forgive myself. And if we don't try to save him, neither of us will forgive ourselves. The rescue took 2 hours. Jake rappelled down into the shaft using a makeshift harness, every movement sending spikes of pain through his injured ribs. But once he reached Midnight Storm, the stallion calmed considerably. Allowing Jake to secure the rescue ropes around his body, Elena coordinated the pulleys from above, using 2 trucks to provide the mechanical advantage needed to lift a 1,000-pound horse. It was dangerous, complicated, and exhausting, but it worked. When Midnight Storm finally emerged from the shaft, shaken but unharmed, Elena felt tears of relief streaming down her face. But her relief turned to panic when she saw Jake, collapsed at the bottom of the shaft, his face gray with pain. Jake, she rappelled down without hesitation, finding him conscious but clearly in agony. Think I might have made the ribs worse, he gasped, trying to smile despite the pain. You think? Elena said, fear making her voice sharp. You probably undid weeks of healing. Worth it? Jake said, looking up through the shaft opening where Midnight Storm's head appeared, the stallion looking down at them with concerned eyes. Look at him. He came back to check on us. Elena looked up and felt her heart melt. Midnight Storm was indeed peering down into the shaft, whinnying softly as if asking if his humans were okay. As they waited for the rescue team to pull them out, Jake took Elena's hand. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For risking your health on a crazy rescue mission? For doubting you. For not trusting that you would choose us, choose this life. When I saw that offer from Los Angeles, all my old fears came back. But watching you these past weeks, seeing how you've taken care of everything, how you've taken care of me, ... Jake squeezed her hand. I know now that you're here to stay. 6 months later, Thunder Creek Ranch had transformed into something more beautiful than Elena had ever imagined when she first arrived. The mudslide damage had been repaired, the cattle were thriving, and her veterinary practice had grown to serve ranches throughout the entire valley. But the most remarkable transformation was in the people who called the ranch home. Jake had made a complete recovery, though he still favored his left side on cold mornings. The experience had changed him in ways that went beyond the physical. The man who had once guarded his heart so carefully now seemed to find joy in the simplest moments, watching Elena work with the horses, sharing morning coffee on the porch, planning improvements to the ranch that would benefit both of their dreams. Elena had never been happier. Her practice was thriving, but more than that, she felt truly useful. Every day brought new challenges and the satisfaction of work that mattered. She had found her place in the ranching community, earning respect not just for her skills, but for her dedication to the land and the people who worked it. But it was the changes in Midnight Storm that pleased Elena most. The stallion, who had once been violent and untrusting, had become the pride of Thunder Creek Ranch, he was still spirited. That would never change, but his spirit was now channeled into strength and grace rather than fear and anger on this particular morning. Elena was in the paddock with Midnight Storm, preparing him for something special. She had been secretive about her plans for weeks, telling Jake only that she had a surprise for him. "Easy, boy," she murmured to the stallion as she adjusted his tack. "Today's a big day for all of us." Midnight Storm seemed to understand that something important was happening. His ears were alert, and he stood perfectly still as Elena made final adjustments to the special saddle she had ordered from a craftsman in Colorado. The leather was tooled with designs that told the story of the ranch, mountains, horses, and even a small thunderbolt that represented the storm that had brought them all together. Jake emerged from the barn, having finished the morning feeding. He stopped short when he saw Elena with Midnight Storm, both of them dressed for what looked like a formal ride. "What's going on?" Jake asked, taking in Elena's best riding clothes and the stallion's fancy tack. "Remember our first conversation?" "About Midnight Storm?" Elena asked, leading the horse toward him. "You said he would never trust anyone enough to be ridden. That he was too damaged to ever be a working horse again?" Jake nodded, remembering his pessimism from those early days. "I was wrong about a lot of things back then." "You were protecting yourself?" "Just like he was." Elena handed Jake the reins. "But healing is possible, Jake, for all of us. Want to take a ride with me?" Jake's eyes widened as he realized what Elena was suggesting. "You want me to ride him?" "I want you to trust him. The same way he's learned to trust you. The same way we've learned to trust each other." Jake approached Midnight Storm slowly, the way Elena had taught him months ago. The stallion nuzzled his hand gently, a far cry from the violent animal who had terrorized the barn when Elena first arrived. "Are you sure about this?" Jake asked, running his hand along Midnight Storm's neck. "I'm sure. He's been ready for weeks. I've been working with him, and he's eager to have a real job again. To be useful, not just pampered." Jake mounted Midnight Storm with the careful movements of someone who understood horses but hadn't ridden in months due to his injuries. The stallion stood perfectly still, waiting for direction. Elena mounted her own horse, a gentle mare named Sunrise that had become her regular riding companion. "Follow me," she said with a mysterious smile. "I want to show you something." They rode across the ranch at a leisurely pace, Midnight Storm responding to Jake's commands with an eagerness that spoke of how much the horse had missed having real work to do. The stallion's gait was smooth and powerful, a reminder of the magnificent animal he had always been underneath the trauma. Elena led them up a trail Jake had never noticed before, winding through the foothills toward a meadow that overlooked the entire valley. When they reached the crest of the hill, Jake pulled Midnight Storm to a stop and gasped at what he saw. The entire meadow had been transformed. A simple wooden arch had been erected near a grove of aspen trees, decorated with wild flowers and flowing white fabric that caught the morning breeze. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, and Jake could see people beginning to gather, ranch hands from Thunder Creek and neighboring ranches. Tom Bradley and his family, even the veterinarian from town who had become Elena's colleague and friend. "Elena," Jake said, his voice thick with emotion, "what is all this?" Elena dismounted and walked over to help Jake down from Midnight Storm. Her hands were shaking slightly, but her voice was steady when she spoke. "I know we never talked about marriage in any formal way," she said, looking into his eyes. "But somewhere between falling in love with you and falling in love with this place, I realized I want to spend the rest of my life building something beautiful with you." Jake felt his heart racing as Elena reached into her saddlebag and pulled out a small velvet box. "Jake Harrison," she said, dropping to one knee right there in the mountain meadow. "Will you marry me?" Jake stared at her in shock. In all his dreams about their future together, he had never imagined this moment happening this way, with Elena proposing to him, with Midnight Storm standing guard nearby, with the entire community that had become their family gathered to witness it. "Elena," he said, his voice breaking, "I should be the one asking you." "Why? Because you're the man?" Elena grinned up at him. I'm a modern woman, Jake Harrison.